This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 212.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. Today, we're talking about vulnerability. Now, I am not a vulnerable person by nature. I'm actually a little bit guarded, some might say. So, talking about this topic was great for me in terms of seeing the insight behind it. And my guest, Kelsey Frost, just moved, or at least when we talked, she had been a part of a new company, ClickUp, a startup. And she joined it as an SE leader. She was, I think, the first SE leader. There were a couple of SEs there. She'll tell the story later. But she talks about building a culture of trust and feedback. And the way she did it was through vulnerability. And we talk about a lot of things. We talk about her being intentional in her career. We talk about joining a company where the SE role is somewhat non-existent. I mean, there might be SEs, but there isn't a process or anything like that. And we spend a lot of time talking about vulnerability, what it means, and is there too much vulnerability? Is there not enough vulnerability? So we talk about that. And I really enjoy talking to Kelsey as most of the people that I bring onto the show, because I get to learn a lot from them, and I learned a lot from Kelsey. And I would love for you to hear what she has to say. So let's just jump into the show. Hey, Kelsey, how you doing?
Hey, Ramsey, doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm kind of jealous. You have a much nicer background than I do.
We try to keep it interesting.
Yeah. Is that the ClickUp's logo? Is that what?
It is.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, well, you've got it. We've got the rainbow colors.
It's the rainbow. Now that we've covered ClickUp, maybe we can cover who you are and how you got to be at ClickUp and what do you do?
Absolutely. I am a manager of solutions engineering at ClickUp. So I am leading a team of solutions engineers, also known as pre-sales engineers, sales engineers, whatever you want to call it. Yep. So really that pre-sales motion at the company. And we are, as a company, a startup. We've been around since 2017. And so we're coming on to 5 years old as a company, which is a fun stage to be at. And I had the great opportunity to join last year in the spring I guess that was 2021, and we're in 2022 now. And so I came in the early stages of building out the pre-sales motion as a manager, and I've spent the last 8 or 9 months hiring and building out a team.
Okay. So what was your experience prior to joining ClickUp?
I've been in pre-sales since 2013. Okay. So I guess that makes it 9 years now, which is shocking to me and probably shocking to others as well. It's been a really fun career in my perspective. I've had the opportunity to do pre-sales myself at a number of different companies. And then at my last role, I was both an individual contributor, a sales engineer, and then moved into a leadership position while there also, and had that opportunity to make a choice to move into a leadership and management role.
Okay. I became a sales engineer in 2014, and I just realized that now it's 8 years. So thank you for doing the math for me. I had to do 9 minus 1 instead of the other way around.
Well, congratulations. 8 years Thanks. Is quite a while.
Yeah, it is the best role ever, in my humble opinion. So
I agree.
The previous roles that you were in, were they also in a startup or were there larger organizations?
I have worked in companies of varying sizes, not in the same pace of hypergrowth that I've had the opportunity to be at with ClickUp over the past 9 months. But I've worked at companies that were already 15 years old, but still rather small, a couple hundred employees, as well as large multinationals, 15,000 employees in the US. So wide variety there, but ClickUp is the first, I would say, early or mid-stage startup that I joined. It's been an incredible journey, having that opportunity to see growth and be part of it.
So you were kind of a player coach in one of your previous roles, and then you get offered a role as a manager in a hypergrowth company. How did you have the courage, or did it even cross your mind that you need courage to join a company where your responsibilities would be a lot more than they were in a previous company that's maybe not growing as much, or they have their systems in place?
It was exciting to me.
Okay.
So one thing that I started doing a few years ago was really being intentional about my own career goals and taking that moment to be introspective. I think it's something when things go quickly, you can pass up a lot of what you want to do, or just not take the time to think about it and plan it out and set yourself up for those. So when I was back over a year ago, when I was going through that occasional touch point process of thinking, what do I want to do? What do I want to achieve? What's fulfilling to me? One thing that I had planned as a sometime career goal for myself was to join an early stage startup and be part of the team that founds what it is to do the pre-sales motion within a company. And so I had written that down, had it in the back of my mind. And so when there was an opportunity to do that, I was really excited about the possibility of making that change and taking on the challenge.
Did you go looking for the opportunity, or was it a headhunter or someone who knows you who reached out?
The ClickUp team reached out to me. So I was in touch with them for a little bit. I wasn't ready or looking for a change. I didn't think it was the right time, but I think whenever you do have those opportunities that come by, that was part of my own decision, knowing that, excuse me, knowing that that was a potential future career move that I wanted to make. Those things don't come along all the time. So I was really excited about the opportunity to make the move.
Was there anything that held you back or made you hesitate before taking that role, or were you just excited 100%, you're just going to go in and kill it?
I was really excited once I finally made the decision. I would say I'm a methodical decision maker. Okay. So there were a lot of boxes I went and checked off in making the decision myself.
I'd be curious to see those boxes, like pros and cons, or what were the criteria? We don't have to go through it. It's just in my mind, I have thoughts that are going through these boxes. I'm not sure why. So now that you're in this role, what are some of the challenges that you faced that you saw coming or didn't see coming?
Let's see. Well, some of the challenges that I knew about going in would be that I was joining a company with a new understanding of what pre-sales is, a rapidly growing sales force, and a pre-sales team that was virtually non-existent. And I won't say it's non-existent. There were 2 people there as solutions engineers before I started, and they'd started 2 months before me. So they were going it alone and blazing the trails, I would say. And
they were
so
veterans of the
exactly. Yeah. So coming in and helping to build those relationships, to work with sales reps who in some cases had worked with a pre-sales team before, and in other cases had never had, to establish what are we doing and why are we doing it and how do we work together. And doing that at a rapid pace was a challenge I knew would be there, and it absolutely was. I think we did it very successfully, if I can say that, after the time frame we've been here. We've got a really good motion going, and our team has grown significantly. We've got 16 people on the team now.
So when you joined, you were the 3rd person on the team. Now you have 16.
I was.
Now there's 16 people.
There's 16 people in solutions engineering roles. There's 20 of us if you count the managers.
Okay. So many questions. Is there anything, you've been on the role for a year? Almost less than a year. It'll be a year in spring. Is there, in this short time frame, is there anything you're proud of that happened where you changed, I guess, the ClickUp world, or have there been more smaller changes that have been going on?
There's a lot that I'm proud of, but I think most I'm proud of what my team members have done. I think seeing the people who were here before me and what they've been able to accomplish, bringing in the first deals of a certain size the company's ever seen, building those relationships, building a reputation, that's been incredible. And also having some of the cohort that we hired and who started in August, already seeing them really hitting the ground running, being integral to the sales process and to the sales teams that they're working with, has been so exciting to really be able to support them in their career and in building those relationships internally with the company.
So the whole company is kind of growing together in terms of like number of people and also the responsibilities of the people I'm assuming are part of the team. How do you make sure that you don't grow in different directions? Everyone's going in the same direction towards the goal, because sometimes people want to grow, but they want to grow outside of what the company's trying to get to.
Yeah, when things are moving quickly, it is important to make sure that people are, for the most part, moving in the same direction. That's always a challenge, and it becomes more of a challenge when you're going in a hypergrowth stage. Yeah. Some of the things that are really important that we've done as a company are provide radical transparency as an organization. So we see that in a number of ways, and I do believe that it's really helped with making sure that people are going in the right direction. And I don't think any company has it perfect. I won't claim that we're doing everything that we can be doing yet, but it's something we're looking at really, really consciously as we grow and as we sustain that momentum that we want as an organization. So when I talk about radical transparency, some of it is having all hands meetings on a weekly basis with the executive team, providing updates on what our weekly active users are, or what our customer acquisition rate has been, our sales performance numbers to the entire company, and being able to transparently say, here's our target, here's where we're tracking, and here are things that we've learned and what we're going to do based on those learnings.
Something that I've seen in university or school, wherever, we're continuously getting feedback from teachers, from students that we work with, from the assignments that we have that we can't figure out or whatever. And then we go into our professional lives and feedback gets even further apart. We don't have a teacher telling us we're doing this right or wrong. Sometimes we have a manager. And in a hyper growth world where everyone's just head down, go, 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 how do you know that you're on the right path? How, even if you do the weekly, all hands, sometimes you're too busy working on other things. Like I've seen myself where I have a product management talking about the best product since sliced bread, and I'm answering customer emails at the same time. How is there continuous feedback? How do you manage feedback to make sure that you're on the same path and make sure you're getting better and your SEs are getting better and the whole company is getting better?
Yeah, there's feedback, I would say, on both a micro and a macro level that you take into account if you're planning for how you grow and develop in the direction of the company or in the direction of the department and what those goals are. And creating a culture of feedback was something that was really important to me when I joined this role and joined ClickUp. And it is not something that happens overnight, and it doesn't happen without attention, but it's something that I do believe is essential for high performing teams and for personal growth as well, to have feedback and to have it in an environment of trust. So for me, that means that everyone has to work with a certain degree of vulnerability. I mean, in order to say, hey, Ramsey, I think your demo was good, but you really could have handled those customer questions a little bit differently. You came off as a little defensive, right? It requires you to be vulnerable to receive that feedback productively. And as someone who's a peer of yours or a manager of yours, it requires a degree of vulnerability and trust to share that feedback and to know that the relationship will stay strong as well. So it's certainly an effort to build that, but it's how everyone has the opportunity to grow and to grow quickly if you're able to establish that.
So if I understand correctly, I think the first part of like getting a feedback culture is developing trust. Is that accurate?
I think that it's really easy to believe that. One thing that shifted my mindset on that was actually reading some of Brené Brown's work. One book that I have really enjoyed of hers is Dare to Lead. And one thing that stood out to me from that is, let me see, I'll grab the specific quote if I can find it. No, I don't have a specific quote, but she talks about how vulnerability is something that you have to have in order to build trust. So trust can be fragile and non-existent if you don't have an element of vulnerability, but being able to be vulnerable to a certain degree can then build that trust that allows you to continue down that path and to put yourself in that position. And that, when I first read it over a year ago, was something that really stuck with me. And I've tried to think about that you have to lead with vulnerability that then gains you trust and allows you to continue down that path.
So, okay, so vulnerability leads to trust. If you're vulnerable and the SEs, so I'm going to push back a little bit. If you're vulnerable and then your SEs that you're working with or the bosses that you're working with are not vulnerable, how can you manage that and maybe help them get, because I agree, some vulnerability leads to trust, but you would need everybody to be on the same page that, hey, we need to be vulnerable, which also requires some trust. Because
it's a chicken and egg scenario, isn't
so
it?
how do you manage that?
I think it requires conscious conversations and thinking not strategically, but selectively about how you communicate. I might say, for example, if I'm trying to build trust and I feel that I'm being vulnerable but others aren't, that could be something that I choose to address head on, not in a confrontational manner, but leading with that desire to build trust and saying, for example, I would really like to have an environment in which we're able to honestly share feedback. And from my perspective, this is what I'm feeling that's getting in the way of that. And can we work together to find ways to break that down or to work around it? Because I think it'll benefit me or you in these different ways.
So I've worked with SE managers who used like the vulnerability where they're trying to ask for feedback and all that, and I've always loved it. But I've talked to other SEs who see that and they tell me, well, that person's insecure about the way they do things. What I loved about what you just said is that you're telling them exactly what you're doing. I'm being a little bit vulnerable with you so that in hopes that we can build trust. It's not I'm being vulnerable with you because I'm afraid or I'm insecure. It's more like, no, I'm doing this for a reason. And hopefully one day you can trust it. But sometimes it just doesn't happen overnight. Have you faced that where some SEs or leaders are not comfortable being that vulnerable? Because I can tell you, I am almost not comfortable being very vulnerable.
Absolutely. It takes time and everyone has a different initial reaction and a different process through it. Being able to give feedback is the ultimate goal to me in this mind. In this perspective, being able to both give it and receive it so that everyone grows. There is that common phrase, I'm sure you've heard it, that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And so in that vein, where this relates to me from a pre-sales perspective is that you want to be able to have the learnings of those around you if you want to go to your furthest potential. So if you're not open to receiving feedback and not actively giving it in a constructive and positive way to others, you might reach a goal in a given quarter because you've learned that lesson yourself. But you could get so much further if you're getting that reciprocal feedback from others and you have that culture of sharing.
It's very interesting. Sometimes like there are different personality types, and some people are those go alone types, the lone wolves. We all know them, especially in sales. Do you screen for that while you're hiring, or is it your belief that anyone can become vulnerable and provide feedback and receive feedback?
Listen, when I talk about vulnerability, I'm not saying everyone needs to tell me everything about their personal life, right? Yeah. But yeah, when we think about it, I do believe that someone on our team and part of our company, my team, is going to be most successful if they're able to contribute to the team as a whole and not focus solely on their own success. Because I would hope that in their moments of need, if they are sick or if they are struggling to learn a new technology or a new use case, that they're able to have the level of vulnerability to say, I don't understand this, I need help. And if someone can't say that, then they're not taking advantage of the opportunity to learn.
I work with several SEs who don't like to ask for help.
It's not easy.
It's easier than you think, especially when people actually start helping you, because then you can go further. Like I can, if I'm an expert in product A, my customer is looking for product B. If I break my brain trying to figure out product B and sell it to my customer and help my customer, I'm first off delaying helping my customer. And secondly, there might be someone else who's just better at that than me, that I can ask for help, and that way we can solve the customer's problem. They can ask me for product A help later on, and I'll repay the favor. But if you're going at it alone, it's sometimes difficult, and which makes me curious. Like, is there a piece of feedback you've received from your team that has helped you so far in your journey as an SE leader at ClickUp?
Absolutely. I remember early on when I first started and I was having a one-on-one with one of the team members who was here when I started. And I asked him for feedback. Do you have any feedback for me at the end of our one-on-one? And one thing that he shared was, sometimes I can't tell what you're thinking. I can't tell what your opinion is. And so it leads me to wonder if I'm on the right path or not. So it would be great if you shared an opinion earlier instead of just asking what others think in a group meeting. And that stood out to me. Here, my perspective of it had been, I'm facilitating discussions, I'm not imposing my thoughts on others, right? But at the same time, what I heard then was, okay, this individual wants my voice to be more present, wants clearer feedback from me on how they're doing, whether their suggestion is something that is valuable. They were newer in their pre-sales career as well, though very experienced in technology and in business. So absolutely, that was a great piece of feedback, and it changed how I interacted with him and also how I interacted with the broader group in facilitating meetings.
Nice. Feedback is one thing that, sometimes you just give it and no one cares, no one listens to it. And it's a difficult topic to kind of discover, because as a leader, you're supposed to facilitate meetings, and then someone in that meeting says, oh, you're not speaking enough. And how do you balance what you know to be, or what you thought to be right, versus like some voice? Because you might get conflicting feedback. Some people might hate that you're speaking in the meeting. How do you balance like all that information and take what's good and leave out what's bad?
When it comes to receiving feedback, there are a lot of different things to keep in mind. All feedback is valuable. It is a touch point that tells you how others are perceiving you or your work or something you said, whatever it may be. Some of it, however, may be something that you're going to change, and others are not. And it's up to you to choose how to incorporate the feedback that you receive. I think about if you're building a culture where feedback is common and feedback is productive to support everyone's personal growth and career growth, it can go in different stages as well. It doesn't become overnight everyone sharing their own personal failures for the group to learn from. That, I think, is one of the later stages that you can get to. But I think even one of the first stages is getting people to freely share and talk about what went well, rather than keeping it private, so that others can learn from their success first. And then you may move on to a stage where you have one-on-one conversations and those private discussions of, hey, I'm really struggling with this, or I lost this deal and I want a second pair of eyes on why.
And how do you provide feedback to those higher above you, if whether they want to hear it or not? How do you do it in a tactful way and make sure that if you're unhappy, you get heard?
Ideal scenario is that you have leaders that are actively seeking feedback. That's not the case for everybody. So it is something where I think you need to provide feedback in small doses, but regularly, if you're starting to build that trust. You know, you really want to be in a position where you're able to say, these things are going really well, and these things I'm struggling with for this reason. Either I'm struggling with it to understand the decision, or I disagree with it, whatever it is. You know, when we talk about feedback, I think some people assume, and I often fall into this trap as well, that feedback is always about things that are bad or constructive feedback. One framework that I find really useful in thinking about feedback is the start, stop, continue. Start doing this thing you're not doing. Stop doing this thing that's not benefiting you. And continue doing this thing that's great. Don't give it up. Right? So often, if you're succeeding in your role, you might know that you're succeeding, but maybe you don't know exactly why. And the most feedback you get is, that was great, but not what made it great or what could have made it better.
I was succeeding for the first 2 years of my career. And then I was requested that I stop everything that I was doing and start doing a lot of other things. So it's interesting, because success in at least in my area, was, I achieved quota. And I honestly, we achieved quota despite of my efforts, not because of my efforts. So sometimes success is not really I could have been a lot more successful, let's just put it that way. But that's the thing, like, no one shared with me, no one provided feedback in the past, up until the senior VP of sales came and visited, how to do things properly. And sometimes when we're early on in our career and we're doing something great, we don't want to share it because we don't want to seem like we're bragging, especially to those who have been there longer. What's the framework of sharing feedback at that? How do we overcome that feeling of sharing feedback and not bragging or humiliating ourselves on the other end of the spectrum?
Absolutely. I think it takes a different degree of comfort or discomfort for everyone to share things publicly, whether it is a success or whether it is a failure. And that threshold, like I said, it varies. For me, it's a little higher than for other people, I think, than for the average. It was something I had to overcome myself, to talk about my own successes publicly, and also to talk about my failures. But it's a journey I went through, and that I am really passionate about supporting my team and going through as well, because ultimately it just made the rest of my peers better when I did do that. And once they started doing it too, I learned so much. I didn't have to struggle through something on my own to get to that point of success. So, you know, how do you do it? It varies for everyone to get to that point, but go ahead.
Maybe before we get there, how did you realize that you are not, that you have that high threshold that you need to overcome? Because a lot of us, we just go through life and we don't know why, like, we have that threshold, or even that we have that threshold. We just think we're not supposed to share anyways. How did you get the self-awareness that you need to share more, and that you need to overcome that high threshold?
It was a piece of feedback I received.
Okay, good.
No, I'm in all seriousness, my manager did say, hey, I would love it if you shared more of what you're doing, of what has gone well for you and how you got to that success. Share the win stories, share the interesting solutions you learned along the way more often with your peers. And so I had to go through that internal conflict of feeling like, well, is it my place to do that? Is it me just flattering myself to put that out there? But ultimately, it fostered great conversations by doing it. And others didn't have to invest the hours it would take for them to learn it on their own.
It's interesting that you learn. I learned it for a totally different reason. So I learned it because I was part of a support team, and I was working with a few, I guess, support engineers. And two of them I knew were very hard workers. They would just take a ticket, bang it out, and close it. And no one would know. And they had the worst relationship with our manager because he thought they weren't doing anything. He thought they were lazy.
Mm.
So for me, from like a self-advertising avenue, I felt that I needed to share what I was doing with at least my boss, so that he knows that I am working and I can get that promotion. So it wasn't for the benefit of the team, unfortunately. It was more for get off my back kind of situation. Like, look, I am working on this. Maybe that's not the best example of a good leadership. Like he wasn't bad, but he wasn't great either. But yeah, I don't know. People find out for different reasons why they need to share what they're doing with other people, I guess.
Absolutely. It's a different journey for everyone. One thing that I've done to try to support this journey within my team is to do call reviews and to do them in a group. We do them one-on-one as well as a manager employee coaching activity for call recordings. I think everyone has recorded client calls these days or can get them.
Yep.
But doing that in a group format is also something that has really led to a lot of bonding within the team. It requires someone to put themselves in the hot seat, right? But their team members know what it's like to sit there too. And they're supportive in that feedback. And at the same time, everyone in the group hears what's going well about the example of a call that someone ran and what the areas are for improvement. So you might have 5 people learning together, you might have 12 people learning together, whatever it is, and they all have that opportunity.
Did you get any pushback? And if so, what was it from the team? Whether it's the way you're providing feedback or they didn't want to be part of that activity?
I was fortunate enough that I did not get any pushback on doing call reviews. It was something that I set up within the first 3 weeks of joining, and I put my own call up first.
Okay.
I threw a demo of my own as the first one for feedback from the team. I said, tell me what I could have done better.
So that's like double vulnerability because you just joined the team. You don't know the product very well. You did a demo and now you're sharing it with the whole world. That's some bravery. I realized that the best. So the team that I worked with was distributed. Like I was in Canada. We had people in North Carolina, people in Chicago, wherever. And the best time I had was when we all got together and we tried to trip each other up during presentations. And our goal was just like, I don't care what you're saying, as long as they trip you up. Like if you say, I know, as you know, as I said, or whatever it was just fun. So, and that built camaraderie. And the more we did that, the more feedback we were able to give each other, just because, I don't know, it was fun, I guess.
I love that. Maybe I'll do that the next time our team gets together.
It's competition at that point. It's no longer just learning. It's more like, oh, my goal is to trip you up. Here's the thing that I see with a lot of SEs is that we practice when everything's going well, right? We go into that meeting, we do a role play, everything went well. But how many times, I don't know about you, but for me, like something crashes. My laptop crashes, the system crashes, electricity, like I had a fire alarm blare for 15 minutes during the demo. We never practiced that. What happens when how do we react? We never practice those things. So if we can trip each other up on purpose, when we go into a customer and we run into that one customer that wants to do that for a living, to trip you up, I just thought it was beneficial in that aspect. So.
No, that's absolutely great. I had someone on our team who was sharing the story on our team meeting earlier today, actually, where he was talking about a demo he was trying to run, a new department. Every other department had been openly sharing what they were doing, what they liked, what their wish list was for things to be different. And this new department was not open to it. They didn't want to be there. They said they loved their current solution, wish list, 0 items on it. And they would leave snarky comments throughout the call in terms of, oh, that's great for you that you have that feature.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I had that.
And, he talked about the process for both him and the sales rep of going through that and how they got through to a painful but successful end, where ultimately the internal feedback from that prospect that they were talking to her peers was, I actually did see something that's interesting to me that I don't have today, and I'm on board if this is what we're doing as a company.
Okay, so I don't know if you're able to share any of that, but can you share what the SE and the salesperson did as a team to get over that negative customer?
They didn't get rattled. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do, but also the most important. If someone is trying to push your buttons, you don't want to push back. And so for them, they moved past areas where it was obvious that the prospect was trying to provoke a reaction or was trying to be argumentative. They continued down a path of saying, other clients like you, this is where they see value. This is the type of solution that they're able to achieve on ClickUp. So why don't we show you that? And you can let us know what sparks your interest as we go. And ultimately, like I said, there was something that individual didn't have, wanted, but didn't know she wanted.
Had they practiced it before, or did it just naturally happen because of experience?
It naturally happened because of experience. I think for that one, both of them are experienced in their roles and they know how to keep calm under pressure like that. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's something that you figure out how to do, right?
It's funny. It happened to me once where I went to a customer and they wanted to buy another product. They already had made their decision, the users, but the directors wanted to buy our product. And their whole job was to try to mock me. So we just started mocking each other. And from that, we developed a friendship, which is maybe not the way I'd recommend people do it today. That was early on in my career, but it worked for me. And then my colleague went down to take over because I was getting married and all that. And they made him cry. They actually made him cry just because they kept doing that to him. And maybe they thought he'd be the same as me, where like it will be kind of a ping pong game, mess around, but no, they made him cry, which I laugh at now whenever I talk to him. So
poor guy.
Yeah, I don't know. He could have dealt with it better.
It's something where I was talking to one of the other managers that I work with last week about this, and it really stuck with me. As you continue down the pre-sales path, I think early on in your career, the calls you want are the ones that go well, the ones that are easy and feel good at the end. And as you get more experienced as an SE, at least my own experience before I moved into leadership, and from what I hear from many others, is the ones that are really exciting and most rewarding are those challenging ones. The ones where the client pushes you and you somehow navigated it anyway.
Well, the easy ones, you didn't change anybody's mind. It's a low-hanging fruit, which you didn't win the deal because of you. You won the deal just because you were there. But those where you can actually change someone's mind, go from enemy to friend. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just, I still, like, that was 10 years ago. Like, I was in network design. I still brag about it today. Like, hey, these guys made my friend cry. They didn't make me cry. We became friends afterwards. So yeah,
the challenges are the most memorable.
Yeah. All right. So this has been great, Kelsey. It is time to move on to the not so fire round. These are the same 4 questions we ask almost every guest, and I would love to hear what you think about it. So question number one, we usually start off with, what do you love about sales engineering and SE leadership at this point?
There's a lot I love about sales engineering and being a leader in this space. From a sales engineering perspective, I have found it to be a role that is the perfect balance of being able to dig in deeply to something, really get ingrained in it, but also push yourself to think creatively. Because whether it is being creative on the deal strategy, whether it is being creative to figure out how to meet someone's requirements when it's not a straightforward yes or no, it's invigorating and fun. And you get a little bit of presentation skills in there too. You get that I'm on stage and I'll either win it or I won't. And that's really exciting. From a leadership perspective, I love still being part of this aspect, still contributing to the strategy piece. That was always one of my favorite parts as an SE as well. That deal strategy, that solution strategy. But really for me, some of the things that are most rewarding are to help others grow in this role and to find their path in it as they continue either entering day one, first SE role, or 10th year, 15th year. Let's see how we continue to make a positive impact.
Nice. Okay. The thought that popped in my mind, like, what if an SE wants to become an SE leader, and there's only 5 SE leaders in the company, which a lot of SEs face today? What would be the direction you would give them to be able to achieve that goal with, or like within your company or outside the company?
The first thing I would say to anyone who wants to be an SE leader is know why you want it. Because it is incredibly rewarding if it's what you truly want. Yeah. And that was something in my own journey that I thought a lot about. And I saw pros and cons of staying in an individual contributor track and of moving into a leadership track. Ultimately, I chose it because it was the right path for me at that time and in the position I was in. But knowing that you're going to draw back from that daily excitement of the deals and move into a role where you're supporting people and you're learning people management skills. Like I said, for me, it's incredibly rewarding, but it is not always the right path for everyone because you are learning a new skill set and stepping away from what you've been developing on. So first, know it's what you want. And then if it is what you want, start to build those people management, relationship management skills. Those are essential. It's not the same as being a principal SE. It is, in fact, very different to think about a hiring strategy, to think about how to give and receive feedback productively in a way that's going to help grow your team.
What do you mean hiring strategy? You just put something on LinkedIn and people show up. That's a whole different topic. All right. There is a shortage of SEs right now, so I don't know. Okay, that will be a totally different topic. But so we're not going to go there today. Otherwise,
that's a whole can of worms.
Yeah. So what would you change about like sales engineering as it stands today?
There's nothing that comes immediately to mind in terms of what to change about sales engineering. But as I think about it a little bit, the only thing that bubbles up for me is a clearer understanding across companies of what the role can be, should be, and the value it's delivering to the business. Ultimately, that's the role of SE leaders and what they need to advocate for inside of companies. But I have also seen companies where, from an executive perspective, they didn't understand that value and that role. And I'm fortunate to not be in one of those companies today. But when you bring in SEs too late in the growth stage and trajectory of a company, it can change the way in which you're operating and you can miss opportunities. So continuing to understand and have measurable ways to see this is the impact of the SE team, both the tangible impact and the intangible impact. and have that more broadly understood.
That's nice. We were talking to someone who actually does like startups, and we had that chat that generally speaking, when there's a startup, they hire the sales team, they hire the SDRs, the BDRs, and then they borrow from the engineering team whenever there's a demo. And the engineering team is great. They know the product very well. They just don't know what the customers need. And we kind of complain like, why don't they hire SEs early on? So I agree with you 100%. The earlier the SEs hired, the better it is for the company in general. So yeah. All right. You already mentioned one resource, and it's Brené Brown, right? Not Renee Brown. I wrote Brené Brown.
It's Brené with a B. Yeah.
Is there another resource?
Yeah.
Go ahead. I don't know. Go ahead. Answer.
You were asking about resources, and I know I did already mention one resource earlier, which is Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, which for especially leaders, I think is an incredible resource. She's written a number of other books, but this one is a compilation of some of the prior research that she's done. Okay. And so from a leadership perspective, I found it incredibly useful. For SEs in general, I would also recommend reading the Challenger Sale if someone hasn't. It is almost mandatory reading for sales reps. It is not always considered as reading for sales engineers. And I do think everyone gets value out of it.
Why the Challenger? Like there's a billion sales systems. Why the Challenger Sale specifically?
Don't have it be the only tool in your arsenal. But the reasons that I recommend it specifically are that let's see, what are the reasons? I think that there are times in which it is too easy to give a yes or no answer or to take a request at face value. And I believe that the sales engineer needs to be able to challenge a customer too. Challenge assumptions of why the customer is there if you're in an inbound sales motion. Challenge the assumptions of what your sales rep is asking you to demo if you're in an inbound or an outbound motion. And have that bravery to know that constructive tension is beneficial to the relationship, and that the easy demo, the positive demo or call, whatever it is, may not actually be the one that changes the customer's mind and gives them that impetus to buy. And so for me, I think that that's a really good reminder. It's by no means the only sales methodology out there. You'll likely get 3 or 4 different trainings over your career or even over the next 5 years. But I think those reminders really stick with me when coaching SEs and when joining a call myself.
It's interesting. I was talking to a gentleman this morning, and I was complaining about the Challenger Sale. So, but
what were you complaining about?
Well, I felt it's very good for the initial call between the salesperson and the customer to bring in the SE, and at which point it becomes consultative. But what you just said, it is the Challenger Sale per question, I guess. Not necessarily it's not the whole system that we're talking about, but it's like aspects of it where it's okay to challenge the customer. As a consultant, sometimes the customer is not right, and we need to challenge them and let them know. And even if there is tension, so you kind of dissected it for SEs versus my thought, like as a whole, like as a system. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I wasn't I'm a solution selling kind of fan or spin selling kind of fan. So in my mind, that's where I went versus Challenger Sale. So I'm glad to have received that feedback from you today.
Absolutely. Take the pieces that work for you from each of the methodologies. There are so many, and each has good elements.
I agree. All right, last question of the not so fire round. Is there a habit you're working on today to improve in your personal or professional life?
There are a couple. I mentioned one earlier on the professional front, which is that a few years ago, I started doing more intentional career planning and checking up on that on a regular cadence. Now, whether that's every 3 months, 6 months, a year, I don't hold myself to a strict schedule there. The important thing though is to think toward the future and have those check-ins and think critically around, what am I doing to get myself toward where I want to go? Where am I at today? And what makes sense as a next step, or to continue developing, even if I don't know what that next step will be, but to continue developing the things that are interesting and challenging to me. And that also applies to leading a team. How do we make sure we're intentionally planning annual objectives rather than taking things as they come? I think it's essential for success. And when I've done it, it makes a big difference. On the personal front, I started 6 months ago doing really regular strength training. I've gotten really into it. I like it.
Nice.
For me, it's about the journey. It's not about the outcome, but I enjoy it.
That's good. It's interesting, like kind of intentional about your goals in your career. A lot of us just let life happen to us. Some of us fall into sales engineering and fall out of sales engineering. So it's good to always know where you want to go. Otherwise, no matter what you do, you'll get somewhere, which may or may not be where you want. So I like that. Good luck with the strength training. It is a lot of fun. So yeah, that's good. So last question, or question before last, now that we're almost done. Is there a question that you wished I would ask you and I didn't? Or do you have any questions for me before we close up?
I think you've asked me a lot of great questions. There's nothing that specifically stands out, no.
Okay, awesome. If people want to reach out and connect with you, especially since you're in the hyper growth mode, where can they do that?
They can reach out on LinkedIn, Kelsey Frost on LinkedIn, the manager at ClickUp. And yes, we are hiring, continuing to grow the team here in North America.
Okay. What's your goal? How many SEs in total over the next year? Any ideas?
For my team specifically, it'll be a smaller number, but across our entire org, we'll add anywhere from 10 to 20 SEs globally.
That's cool. Well, good luck with that. I know it's a lot of work. Even if you're not the hiring manager, sometimes you get pulled into helping with interviews and making decisions. So good luck with that. And
thank you.
I will see you soon.
All right, sounds good.
And that's the end of the show. Thank you, Kelsey, for coming on. I really appreciated your vulnerability, talking about the stuff that you did talk about. There was a lot of great information on there, so I really appreciate you taking the time to actually talk with me. So let's just leave it at that. I do have to plug the SE hotline. If you're feeling vulnerable and you admit that you need help getting to the next level as a sales engineer, check out the SE hotline at wethesalesengineers.com. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you guys for listening. With that, I am signing off.